What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Above Average Podcast. I am Will Marshall, and I'm sitting here with Ethan Merritt.
What's
Ethan,
going on, everybody? I'm
how you
Ethan
doing?
Merritt. Good, man.
Good.
Podcast number 2
Podcast number 2.
on the new season, 2024 season.
2024 season, yeah.
I don't know if we're calling it something.
Gray day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I mean, but it does make for good lighting, which we were just talking about.
Yeah, lighting in here is cash money, which
Phenomenal.
it's hard to get good lighting these days. You need it. It changes everything.
It does. Oh my God, yeah.
It's so important.
Yes.
It's crazy. You ever see the picture of people that don't get spray tans and they perform in bodybuilding competitions?
No.
So I don't think it happens
Okay.
very often, because if you do that, it's like you're losing. Like there's no way you could win. But the reason that people get so bronzed out is because when you're like pale, you have no definition, because the stage lights are so bright that the definition just disappears from your body.
You know, I kind of figured it was from stage lights because I've seen a bodybuilding comp. I've only seen like 2 of them, and they are just blasting light. And
Yeah.
I'm sure when you're on stage, you can't see anything. Like you can't see anybody out there
No.
in the audience. I'm sure it's pitch
No.
black for them.
The picture, if I could find it, which maybe I could find it, but it's I don't know if this dude just like, I mean, because he's built, like you can tell he trained, which in my mind I'm like, that's got to be like devastating to like do all that training and get stage ready and then like just like forget to get tan, you know, because then you're just throwing all of that out the window. I mean, I guess competitions are pretty close. Like you could do one and then do another one a month later, but like this guy looked like flat, and he wasn't. Like you could see it that he wasn't, but there was just no, like he wasn't going to out angle anybody, you know, like it's just like, just
Yeah. Like,
completely different.
well, especially standing next to somebody else. Like
Yes.
if you're standing on your own and you're flooded with lights, yeah, you know, it's not going to look amazing, but like you shoot content in the gym, if there's nobody else around, it doesn't necessarily throw off the viewer until you stand next to somebody who's jacked and tan, and then you're side by side. And then especially if it's just you and then a ton of people that all look the same, then it's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
we want to give you the win, but we like literally can't.
Yeah. It's crazy what that can do for like you personally as well. Like I've seen myself in good lighting and bad lighting, you're just like, damn, what have I been doing? Like, do I need to change something?
Oh my God. I feel like when I'm in bad lighting, I feel like I just look older sometimes. I'm like, oh man, I'm looking like tired. It has nothing to do with me being tired. It's just the down lighting. I have a big eyebrow, like a big brow line, like a caveman. And I feel like it just makes my eyes look dark, like they're dark underneath. And I'm like, oh shit, this looks awful.
Yeah. You got thick eyebrows like I do.
I do. Yeah.
Mine are pretty dark, but
Part Neanderthal.
yeah, that's, you know, we still got a little bit of that in us. But
Apparently.
no, you know, it's funny. I think about talking about bodybuilding and shit like that, because like, obviously I have no experience in bodybuilding, and, but it's so like, it's a part of fitness, obviously. And I think what's interesting about it is that people equate fitness with bodybuilding. Like they think it's the same thing. Like you talk about someone getting into the gym. Like I can't tell you how many people say to me, yeah, I want to start hitting the gym. I want to get toned and lean, but I don't need to get big. I'm like, listen, this is one of the most frustrating things that I've ever heard in my life, because again, I've never done it myself, but I know how much work that takes. Like that is like, that's it. That's all you do. And part of this as a coach, like it's my job to explain to people that like that should not be a concern for you. Like it's not going to happen on accident ever. And so part of me, I have to almost like empathize with the fact that they just don't know. And like, I have to like, you know, take a step back and just explain. But then the other part of me is like, that's the most ignorant thing that you could possibly say, because you see these people that are just so massive and like, they don't ever eat anything that they eat what they have to. They don't eat what they want to. They're in the gym all the time. And they're working to failure and then some. Like they're destroying themselves in the gym to like achieve this blip in time.
Yes.
That means being stage ready.
Yep.
And the fact that people think that can just happen just because like, oh, I lifted heavy reps or heavy weight for low reps. Like it's madness. And like that same theory, I shouldn't be able to fit through the door at that point, because I've been lifting for 9 years. Like I don't look like I've been lifting for 9 years. At least I don't think I do. Like, yeah, I'm fit, but like I'm not overwhelmingly huge or anything.
Right. Yeah. And no, I mean, I completely understand that, because I've been in the gym consistently since I was 14. So I'm pushing on 15 years.
Right.
I probably wasn't lifting properly very well, like at the level I'm at now. Definitely not that long, but I definitely got good form, good technique, good right things to do, good programming out. Probably when I was like 21, 22 is when I really started actually optimizing those things.
Mm-hmm.
So that's still 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm 32 soon. And you know what? I mean, genetically speaking, I'm kind of am where I am, and I push limits and boundaries like people should.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, when people come back around to that and they have a goal in mind and they're setting goals, it's like, where do you think that comes from? You're like, where do you think those guys come from? Like, they come from a place of extreme, like discipline, malnourishment, science behind it too. Like they're like malnourished in some sense, but there's science behind it to get preposterously thin in body fat while still keeping your masculine composition or whatever you want it to look like. I mean, it's absurd. It's absurd to think that someone's just going to magic into that on accident.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, we had the previous season of the podcast, we had a woman on. Her name was Jess. She was a bodybuilder. She's a competitor. I don't remember exactly what like division, like class type of competing she was doing, but you know, she would go through like the prep phase, and we asked her, and because I'd always heard this was a thing, is like the last, I don't know, 60, 45 days leading up to a show, like it is rough. And she was telling us like you're not operating optimally as a human at that point. Like it's literally just for that goal and that's it. Like you have to, like you're you know, you got like the brain fog, like you're very hungry, like you have to, you know, manipulate your water intake, not things that as a normal person that you would ever do. Just, you throw basic needs like almost out the window at that point. And that's a mental game in itself. Like that's gotta be so hard to do, to stay that committed when you feel like, when everything in your body's saying, like telling you to go against it.
Yep. Yeah. That I haven't done it. Maybe there'll be a goal. I don't know. It might not be.
I've always wanted to try, just to say that I did it, just to be like, I've gone through that. I know what that's like, but I also don't really want to at the same time.
Well, it's sort of just a balance of like there's a difference between what's attainable and then what's something that you can actually just like continue to do.
Yes.
And attainable is different. Like any human can attain just about anything, but it doesn't mean you're able to do it forever, you know?
Yeah. At what cost?
Yeah. Like at what cost, right? And so like we were just talking about this. So we have a lot of people like in your field of work specifically, and then in my area of interest, come January, come the beginning of the year, they set goals for themselves. Of a lot of them are physical goals. You know, I feel like people get off the wagon from the holidays and they let themselves divulge into whatever BS they're doing, you know, November, December, sometimes before that. And then they want to get it together. They want to get their act together and set a new goal. So what do you see from people that set goals in the fitness industry, or people that are just wanting to get in shape, you know, when it's the beginning of the new year? Like what's your take on it?
So there's a couple of interesting things that pop up with this. And I've had, because especially, I mean, we're at that point in the year right now. I mean, we're 3 days from, you know, January 1st. And in like, as a personal trainer, November and December are expected to be slow months because you have the holidays. A lot of people aren't thinking about getting fit right now, but it's in their mind. Like they're like kind of pushing it, you know, off. And that's not to say I haven't added clients like during this time. Like I have added a few. And the thing is, I always try to be really upfront with those people, and I'll just say like, listen, I applaud you for what you're doing, because you could very easily wait until January 1st, because that's what everybody does. And we have this made up like start date. It doesn't make any sense when you really step back and think about it. It's like, why? Like for what? You know, yeah, it's the start of the new year, but that happens every year. You know, there's no difference between starting November 1st and January 1st. Like it's the same idea, but you know, we have Thanksgiving, then we have Christmas. Like, sure, like you're gonna have times. Like, I mean, I approach the holidays as if like, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna let it rip. Like I'm gonna enjoy myself. Because the way I see it is like, you put in work the other 361 2 days out of the year so that you can enjoy those single days. As long as you don't let that day turn into a week, turn into 2 weeks, turn into a month, you'll be fine. Like you're not gonna ruin anything. But the people that started prior to New Year's, like I even give them like a couple weeks free. Like I had someone that signed up right before Christmas and I was like, listen, like you're going to get the next 2 weeks free because I understand that it's probably not going to go perfectly. You know, you're going to have things you're doing, you're going to be busy, you're going to be traveling, whatever. And so just the fact that you were willing to start, like I'm just going to reward you with that. And then like, you know, then we'll, you know, it's not to say that we're going to hit the ground running on January 1st. Like you already started, we're already like kind of taking steps towards getting everything together. But I think in past experience, what tends to happen is there's people right now, and even 2 weeks ago, they're thinking about getting started, but they're not taking action towards it because they know that the holidays are going to be crazy. And again, I know that, but it's that all or nothing expectation where it's like, oh, I can't work out 4 days a week right now. I'm not going to eat perfectly. So what's the point in starting? That's a problem.
Yes, because that's just looking for the excuse to have an out, right? It's like it's saying, well, I'm going to eat a lot and drink a lot. I know that. Well, that's 2 weeks away.
Right.
So I'm just going to say whatever for 2 weeks
mm-hmm.
and then get to that point. I think that's most people, which is like some parts of me, it's like understandable. Like coming from like a corporate job, I understand that last quarter in the year, most jobs, it's like crunch time. So you're working later. Most of the time it's getting dark earlier. Like there's more variables that seem to weigh on that one option where it's like, well, all of that and it's going to be the holidays. And it's going to be the holidays as that tipping point of like, life's busy normally and I'm pretty good normally, but oh, well, you know, I might as well just wait till January because, you know, it's almost Christmas in 4 weeks. And then it's 4 weeks of doing nothing. And then it's like, man, it hurts like shit when you're coming back into the gym. And I was like, well, those 4 weeks, then it's just one day.
Yeah.
It's one day, maybe 2 days. There's a couple holiday parties. You can still stay on the wagon. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
You know?
And the thing is like, okay, well then what happens next year?
Right.
You know, like, okay, you're starting January 1st. Like you can't just start and stop. Like no one does anything for 6 months at a time. Like you can't do that fitness wise. You know, you can't, maybe it's not as much of a problem as I think it is,
mm-hmm.
but I do feel like there is this notion that people think like, oh yeah, I can hit it hard for 24 weeks or 12 weeks or whatever, and then I'll be good. It's like, well, no, like you have to keep doing what you're doing, or you have to keep doing the things that got you the results to keep the results and then to keep progressing. So then in the same sense, it's like, okay, you start January 1st, say you stick with it for 11 months. That's a long time for someone new, and you're steady for 11 months. Okay, now we're back at the same point in time. Now what happens? Are you done again for 6 weeks? And then you have to do it all over again. Then you have to start again on January 1st. And then you're going the same thing 11 months. And then you stop. Like
right.
You can't do it. Like it's just not sustainable
mm-hmm.
because you just keep hitting that wall and your momentum goes to zero. That's a big thing that I talk about with my clients is momentum and how, you know, they say if you're making healthy decisions, like you start with one, you're going to want to make more because you're not going to want to like offset that one healthy decision with a bad decision. So you're going to want to keep making healthy decisions. So, you know, you get to Christmas Eve, and even I felt it this year, like Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, I was a piece of shit. Like I just kind of like laid around. I ate a bunch of food because that's what we're supposed to do. Like you're supposed to take the time. And I felt on the 26th, I was like, man, like I got to do something, you know, because I've been sitting around so much. And then I went for a run and it didn't feel good, but now I consider myself like I've got momentum again. You know, I worked out 3 days in a row. Today was a rest day. Tomorrow I'm back at it. Like I feel like I'm right back into my routine, but I've also done that so many times. To me, it's whatever, just like starting again. Like that's just what it is.
I did the same thing. I went to Christmas and the next day, the day before Christmas Eve, I went to the climbing gym, mostly because I had the time, right? So it's kind of a weird thing to say this, but in some sense, I was like, oh, the gym is open. And I was with my girlfriend. We were about to travel the next day, but I was like, we got time to go to the gym because we both don't have any work. Like we got nothing going on. So we went to the gym. And then the day after, I also went back to the gym, you know, because I'm kind of like you. I'm like, oh, take that rest time, whatever. That one day won't be detrimental, realistically.
No.
2 days. still won't really be detrimental, even possibly a week, but you're going to feel it as that time adds up because you're losing that momentum in the first place.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, you know, one thing I thought about when we were starting like the topics today was understanding where people start from and then where do they fall off when it comes to January. And I have some theories, some of it's person dependent and some of it's based on seasonality or just having a goal that is maybe too ambitious. I think that's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a few lanes with that, but let's talk about the first one. I think most people set a goal that might be too ambitious because they go from the couch for potentially months and months and months, and then they really just like lean into being a shithead, you know, come holiday time.
Yeah.
Because that's when everybody else is. And then they're like, I'm going to get my shit together. Like, I'm going to get my act together come January. And then they set a really unattainable goal. So what's your take on that from clients, from friends, yourself? Like, I've done it before, but few and far between times have I got myself caught in that now.
Yeah. I made I think it was a reel about this recently. It was just like starting a routine too hot. And especially the starting point matters. Like for me, like let's just say that I mean, maybe not at age 28, like, but coming out of college, like I was, you know, a high level athlete up until I was 23. Let's say, for example, I didn't do anything from when I stopped playing soccer and then I, you know, turned 24 going into that new year, whatever year that would have been, and I want to start. I probably still would have been hurting if I like went to the gym 4 days, like just from nothing. But I probably could have got myself through it because I've done that kind of stuff before. But for somebody that's never like actually done it, to where you've never had like a consistent routine, you've never been in it, that's going to be so hard to do because, and I even do this with my clients now, like doesn't matter when they're starting. It's like, you're going to start with 3 days a week. I know that feels like not a lot. And they even say to me that like this, I don't feel like I'm doing anything, but I'm like, yeah, but we're building up to 4 days a week or 5 days a week or whatever. Because if you go that first day and destroy yourself with volume, like you go into the gym and you're like, oh yeah, I can move all this weight. I can do 3 sets of 12 bicep curls. Next day, you can't straighten your arms. You're like, I don't want to do that ever again. And so then that people run into that, I think, where they just start too hot because they feel good in the moment. And then they don't realize how much that's going to affect them the next day or the next 2 days or 48 hours from that point. And then I think that's where it's hard to want to go back because you're just so blown up and you're like, oh, this is how this is going to be. And then they've never pushed through that soreness or that like heavy level of fatigue before to know that it doesn't last.
Right. And
so then that's where you get caught up. And then I think the other piece too is, especially starting at this time of the year, like everyone's doing it. And so there is it's like the obstacle of dealing with a crowded gym, which thankfully I don't have to deal with because the gym I go to, like I go to a CrossFit gym, like it's not going to be super crowded ever. There's always like space. You have your own space all the time. But if you're starting like by yourself, you know, maybe coming up with your own plan, going to a Planet Fitness, and there's 1 million people in there, like you don't even know how to navigate the gym at an off period. And now you've got to go navigate the gym plus 10 dozen people that are trying to do the same thing. Like that's also a hindrance.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. And I think that when you're putting yourself out there and you want to do that in January, I think there's a lot of motivation and there's a lot of people around you that might be doing something similar. You might be able to find more commonalities, but then you do have that drawback of everybody seems to be jumping on the bandwagon of like getting their shit together.
Yeah.
Because it's January. So it's like you'll see more posts on social media, like you might dive more into it as a little bit of a passion, and you feel that quick dopamine hit of that. Like it's more like they get the dopamine hit of thinking of doing it and then actually doing it and then really digging into doing it as a routine. It's not even the same thing.
No,
it's not even the same field.
That's a thing though, is I had a client who was a counselor, and he was very like, I don't want to say like cerebral in the way that he thought about things, but I think he thought a lot about the psychological like aspect of it. And he would tell me, because this guy's like, he was with me for a period of time, then he stopped and he came back. And then we had the initial call about him coming back. And he said, he was like, yeah, like I'm getting I'm going to get the dopamine hit of deciding that I'm going to do it. And I was like, I've never really even thought about that before.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I was like, this is like kicking me off, is like taking the action towards starting, but I'm not ready to start yet. And I agree with that? Not necessarily, but there is something there. And I think that's interesting, because it's never crossed my mind. Like I've never thought about the fact of like maybe it's just because I've just done it. Like I've never thought about why, but
right.
The idea of just like thinking yourself into it, that is taking action in a way of like within your own mind, but then you still have to like do it in a concrete way that's like going to be real.
Right. I think there's a reward system in the brain that talks about, well, there's people that have talked about it in the sense of, if you're getting the dopamine hit talking about this goal that you want, there are people, and I've met people like this, that it's made more sense because they always seem to be talking about doing something and they don't necessarily really do a lot.
Yeah.
And I've thought about it and I was like, they're getting the reward like me and you would from the accomplishment, but they get it on the front end. They don't have to do the accomplishment. Hey man, like I'm going to go do this. And they're like, oh, their friends are like, oh wow, dude, that's really cool.
Yes.
And I'm like, when you do like test that, like say a lie to somebody, that's a really ambitious goal, but it's not overly ambitious, but like they're like, oh dude, that's really cool. Like you get like the eyebrows raised in this and it makes you happy and it makes you feel like you accomplished something. All you did was talk about it.
Right.
And I've met people that do that kind of a lot and they're always kind of trying to do something. And I had somebody even try to call me out on that because they're like, well, like you always talk about wanting to do stuff. And I'm like, what have I talked about that I haven't done?
Right.
There's things I want to do that are goals that are long-term. Like I prepared for a marathon. I hurt myself. I ran the half. I just raw dogged the half. Last month, did not run a single day. KT taped up my ankle a lot and ran the half because I fell off the wagon of my training. And I was like, I had an injury from it. Training up. Do I need to run 26 today and potentially get an injury? Or can I push the marathon another time? Now that I've done, 80% of the running, I know what it takes. Let's try this again because my goal was to run it, but I had an injury. So it's like, well, I met myself halfway.
Yeah.
And I had somebody try to call me out and say like, why aren't you going to do the marathon this year? I'm like, oh, I'm actually going to work it. And they're like, well, you said that you're going to do it. I'm like, well, I'm still going to do a marathon. It's not that I'm not going to do it. It's just timing and place, right? So I don't necessarily like get my rocks off from telling people I'm going to do stuff. I definitely feel that reward system more when I actually do it. But I can see where people come from, where they get the dopamine hit early.
Yeah. I read something recently. Well, it wasn't super recently, but I think it was thought that like the dopamine system was like you get the hit of dopamine when you accomplish stuff, but it's actually in the act of like achieving it rather than like when you're done with it is when you like actually get that hit. And I mean, something to be said about the support system that you have built in, like with your own network. The fact that someone even called you out on it is a good thing because at least there's some external accountability there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think the way it was presented to me was like, it was in a sense of like, well, I'm just trying to be a good friend, but you said this. And I'm like, okay, well, it's all right to call me out on it, but I'm not dead yet. So I have plenty of time to run a marathon, just like I said I would.
Yeah.
And so I think there's a level of people that set an ambitious goal and it's too much for them. And they set an ambitious goal and they get a hit of dopamine. And then when it comes time to do it, gyms are crowded, all these things, all these factors come into play. And then it's hard to hit the reward system again. Realistically, you're like not really going to hit it the same way as when you hyped yourself up about it.
Yeah.
I think that's one big category of people. And then I think there's another category too. Do you want me to tell you what it is?
Yeah. Hit me.
I want to know if you know people like this too. So there's one group of people like that. And I think there's crossover, but I think there's people that get a level of expertise or reward or accomplishment. And then they give themselves too much freedom after that. They're like, well, I do look good. So, I'm just going to like not go to the gym as much because like I already look good and I feel good. And then they stop progressing because they look good and feel good. And it's almost like they forget, that progress had happened and it came from like you made progress. You want to maintain progress. And I think that's where seasonally some people start in January. They do good in the winter. There's like less stuff going on. Then comes summer, they kind of fall off in the summer instead of the winter. because they're going out and about, they're taking vacations. And like, well, yeah, like I've done some good work. So now I'm just going to like drink a little more, like go on some boat trips, do whatever. And then they end up doing that more than they would like. And then they're coming back around towards the winter, already falling off a consistent plan from just saying, well, I did good. It's like, well, do you want to do good once or do you want to maintain good? Because you're going to forget what it feels like to be good after you've done nothing for a couple of weeks.
Yeah. No, yeah, to your point. There is so with personal training, just as a job, the way like the outlook of a year is like the busy season, for example, looks like, obviously you have January because of what we just talked about, but then the next big month is September. Like they say, and I never knew this
really
until I got into it. Yeah, it was like September and January are considered like the golden months because, and I've experienced this now at this point. Like I will say in 2023, August through October were the 3 consecutive biggest months I've ever had in my career. And I never really understood why. Like I wouldn't have thought of that on my own. And then like being in the network of trainers that I'm in, like the reason being is because people, and it might be because they had success in January, it might not be, but when the summer winds down, because the summer ends up being busy for people because it's just summer. People are doing shit. People that have kids, like, you know, they're not in school anymore, so they have to do things with their kids and like they're just way more busy. And so September comes around, kids go back to school, summer winds down, like you kind of get this period of, it's like, okay, I have a time to make a change. So September, it's like a cyclical thing. Like, you know, like, so there could be people in there that do really well, say January through, I don't know, March, April. And then they're, you know, feeling good, enjoying the gains that they got through the summertime, and then maybe take some time off, and then they hit September and they're like, okay, I've got to, you know, get back to it again. And so you see the January wave, you see the September wave, and there's also kind of like a May, like half wave, where it's the people that maybe didn't start in January at all, and then they realize like, oh, I'm about to be out at the pool and I haven't really done anything. And so then May, they're like, I got to get my shit together.
Yep.
So you've got January, September, and then May also. And that's not to say you can't like pick up clients at any month, but like those ones are the biggest ones where people are like, okay, I'm ready to go.
See, and like that makes sense a little bit off of the theory. Like if somebody does start in January, maybe they do fall off the wagon in summer because it's kind of like I said, vacation time, kids are off, summer, wanting to go out and about and do things, and they did make gains. So like, yeah, go ahead and enjoy the fact that you like lost 20 pounds and looked a little bit more ripped. You know, that makes sense that maybe you might lose a little bit there and then want to pick it back up again. So like that makes sense to me, but I don't think I would have intuitively thought that either. And no. I'm just starting my training journey here where I passed my test and I have yet to have a single client that's an actual client that like is going to pay me, and I have to set up structures and figure out seasonally like what makes sense. And so I haven't had those hurdles yet to figure out. So it's interesting that you talk about it because I think it's good for people to have that perspective that we're talking about today. It's like you can progress through these issues, but these are known sticking points or known excuses that people have. And when it comes down to it, you know, if you're putting yourself in the position to better yourself, you're on the right track. There's times and places to take breaks, but the hardest part is taking a longer break than just a break. And then you're trying to jump back in. And then you have these variables that come into play.
Yeah. And that's the gap that you run into like as a coach. And even if I was somebody that had been through that type of stuff before, which I'm not, like I've, you know, never really had a time where I've like severely fallen off and started again. But even if I was, ideally you want to get to the point where you're not doing that. And so then you have to like bridge this gap between like understanding what that means to be on the other side of, you know, being able to keep yourself going. And that's the hard part for me sometimes, because I'm like, it's ingrained in my behavior, you know, like I'm not going to fall off ever. And even if I do, I know I'm going to start again. Like I'm never concerned about holidays or anything like that, because I know I'm going to get that itch and like I'm going to want to go back to doing what I was doing, to working out and like, you know, just being on top of things in that sense. But there's other people that don't think that way. Like they hit one period of time where they fall off and then they think that that's it. Like they're done.
Yep.
And it's like, that's part as a coach, you have to kind of meet them where they are and just say like, listen, you got to understand, like this is going to happen again and again and again. Like there are going to be times when your momentum goes to zero and you're going to think like, oh, it's just so easy to do nothing. It's always going to be easy to do nothing. And I mean, that's a thing with anything. Like it's not just fitness related, you know, like no matter what you're doing, it could be a podcast. Like, I mean, there's going to be a time where we're going to run into like, oh, we can't, you know, our schedules aren't lining up. Like we don't have, who knows, we don't have guests to bring on, or we don't have anything to talk about. And there's going to be dips, but if you want to keep, I tell people, remember why you started. I had a conversation like this with a client yesterday where after the holiday, I'll check in with people. Like, you know, I told everybody leading up to it, because I usually do a check-in on Monday. And I said, I was like, if you don't, like Christmas Day was Monday. And I said, like, if you want to do your check-in, fine, but I'm not going to respond because it's Christmas. Now, after that, if you want to do your check-in just to kick you back off and like, just to like, you know, that can be like you taking action as to like, okay, I'm back on it again. Great. And so this conversation I had with my client, he said, he's like, yeah, I just have no motivation to go to the gym. And I'm like, okay. And this is where I said, I was like, do you have motivation to go to work? And he's like, yeah, but I have to. And I'm like, okay. So different question. Why did you start? And he was like, because I want to make a change. I'm like, do you still want to make a change? Yeah, of course. There's your motivation right there. You know, and so it's always coming back to the why. Like, why'd you start? Because that's always going to be there. Like you're not going to get to a point, and maybe you will, you're going to accomplish that goal. But that's the beauty of like fitness, is there's no finish line. You know, like you might accomplish what you want to accomplish, say in a given year. You know, you might hit your New Year's resolution, but then it's very rare, I think, to see all that progress, make all those changes, and then just to be like, I did it, I'm done. Because it doesn't work like that. You know, like there's always going to be more to do.
Yeah.
So, and that's another piece of it too, as a coach, you have to get people to kind of like, you have the conversation where it's like, okay, we've done this. What's next? What do you want to do next? It's like a reframing of goals. And that's, if you've never even accomplished your first set of goals, no one's even thinking about their second set of goals. And so it's, sometimes I think people will, you know, take that natural break where it's like, okay, I've done it. I'm good. Like, this is great. And it's instilling that thought process of this isn't over.
Right. Yeah. And, you know, I think there's times and places for it. Like, you know, doing 75 hard was one of those times where I set aside time to do something that is overly ambitious that most people fail. And I tried it once before and I failed it. Just flat out right. Went on a bachelor party. I was the best man to my best friend's bachelor party.
Tough time.
It is a tough time to stay on a 2-a-day workout schedule, reading books, drinking water, not drinking alcohol. It's just like, you know, and I didn't have the discipline to stick through it, but I also was like, I don't want to burn my friend's memory of this as your best friend that I grew up with, like wasn't having fun with everybody, which I know I could have, but it was a thing where I was like, you know what, I'm going to take the L on that, but I'll try it again later. So I tried it again this past year with a group of 2 other people, which by the way, if you've ever done this, much easier with other people to do it. You know, it's a community aspect of holding yourself accountable with others. And I knew that doing 75 hard is not longevity for me. I think it could be for some people, but I don't think it is for many people on this planet, because it's kind of overkill optimization. But what it did was it gave me a goal and an end goal with it. I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to do 2-a-day workouts the same capacity, but for 75 days I will, and I want to see a definitive result. But I'm not going to stop working out. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. The other 2 people did things differently on the end of it. One guy kind of continued with wanting to like get a 6-pack and work through it longer, not have the exact same structures. And the other guy was like, just last couple of weeks, I can't wait to drink. I can't wait to not do this. Mm-hmm. He is up 25, 30 pounds in weight since we had stopped doing it, which was September. So September to now January, right? He's now basically just regressed back to whatever it was before. Wow. So I made good gains in that time. Like I got really shredded. I got stronger, mentally more clear. Like it was challenging. It wasn't the hardest thing I've ever done. But keeping that consistency for 75 days is the test, not necessarily just doing it once.
Yeah.
But at the end of it, I was like, I want to maintain this at some level. So I wanted to continue at least maintaining what I'd gained instead of just regressing. So I think setting it an overly ambitious goal short term is not necessarily terrible. It doesn't need to be on January 1st, and it doesn't need to be if you've been on the couch. Like, do something that's not even a short-term gain, but just a short-term consistency, and make that a long-term consistency, and then say, okay, now I'm going to challenge myself.
Yeah.
Do a competition, train for something specific, instead of just jumping couch to something else. You're like, on the worst end of it, you get injured and you can't do something. And on the best, you just fail it.
Yeah.
And you have to start over.
Yeah. It's like stacking like small wins,
Exactly.
If your goal is too ambitious off the jump, like it's going to be, even like you mentioning, like someone goes hard for 75 days. There's like a viral tweet out there somewhere. It's, you don't need 75 hard. You need 300 days normal.
Yeah, exactly.
Because then you can maintain that,
Uh-huh.
and I think 75 hard it's a cool idea. And like for someone like you, doing it at the time that you did it makes sense, because it's like you're looking for a challenge and like you already have a base of fitness and discipline. But to go from 0 to that, like that's so difficult to do.
Well, and with that too, like, so one thing, like one goal that I have is to, which I think I told you this when I said, hey, I'm going to get my CPT, right? Like I want to have some training background that I can actually leverage with people, whether that be for like a monetary value or just for my education for like our Pose app.
Yeah.
Either or, I just want to have more education on it and have another, challenge that's just not a physical challenge with experiences. So, I want to make a program that is 75 days. I have to be careful with the branding here.
Right.
But I want to make one because there is no program around it. So like, because I've had a lot of good experiences and a ton of background knowledge and testing and like 15 years of lifting, it's not hard for me to go in the gym and make a workout. And I could do 2 a day and I don't even have to think much about it. I'm like, okay, well, this body part sore for this reason, because I did this the last couple days. Let me make these adjustments, right? But there's no workout program. So like that program's really tough. And if you have no experience, it's brutal because you're just winging it. And you're winging it and testing it in the most, like, I'm not going to say advanced way, but 2 workouts a day. So at the minimum, one of them is going to be walking outside and the other one's going to be whatever else you can make up. But that's really hard, to 7 days a week of a minimum 1 strength training workout that you're trying to make up. And it could be anything else than strength training too. So like, I have a goal of writing a program for somebody to do it at home where, minimal entry point of equipment, because you're doing 2 a days. It might be working out late, but it gives a structure behind the program itself, because I thought it was a good challenge that most people can't do. But I think it's another layer when you don't have a fitness background and you're trying to do something that's very heavy fitness. I mean, that's just ambitious as hell. And the guy that started it, he's very challenging to people in this way. Like, if you've ever heard him talk about it, he basically says, he's like, don't say you're going to try 75 hard because you've already failed.
Yeah.
The minute you say you're trying it, you're already out the door.
Yeah.
And I think it's a little extreme to do that, because the average person doesn't necessarily have the mental fortitude, which that is the challenge, but they also don't really have the education to actually schedule out random programming.
No.
Like, if you were to take your programs that you do at the highest level, that's not every day, but let's say it is every day for 75 days. If you just gave that to somebody and it was 1 week, and then they're just like, I'm just going to do that for all 75 days, something's going to go wrong somewhere. Yeah. They're going to blow out their knee just because they've done too many leg days. So it's very, very dynamic when you set a very ambitious goal still.
Oh yeah. There's a lot to it. And I mean, that's part of the reason that I even have a job, it's because like, I mean, the person I had a client today, and she told me, she was like, I just don't know what to do. I'm like, that's why I'm here. Like
there you go.
It's eventually you'll know. And that's my experience too. Like I didn't know what I was doing when I first started lifting. Like, I mean, I remember the first day I started lifting was in the garage at my parents' house when I was 18, and I did so many curls the next day I couldn't straighten my arms. Would I recommend that to anybody? No. But like, that is the trial and error that I just went through. And then I got to college, and then we're doing Olympic lifts, and I hated it in the beginning. I was like, I don't know how to do any of this shit. But then 4 years of someone giving you lifts and programming, eventually you can, kind of design it for yourself. But the average person doesn't understand, volume accumulation and deloads and, 75 days of 2-a-days. Yeah. Like it's going to be too much if you don't do it in the proper way, especially
Right.
if you take, like you said, like the first week and you do that for like by the 5th week, you're going to be pretty beat up,
Yeah.
and then that alone right there is like, how do you manage it? Cause I would imagine, and I mean, I don't think I've ever asked you about this, but I would imagine you're not maintaining the same level of intensity the entire time through 75 hard, right?
Nope.
So like it's a practice of just showing up,
Yep.
So I mean, like walking outside, yeah, that counts. But then like the strength training by itself, I mean, I would bet like after week 4 or 5, like the volume and intensity is not the same as it was during week 1.
Yeah. So I guess, okay, so I'll give you the breakdown of what I had done as a general strategy because I kind of veered in and out of some of it. I had an end goal of doing a shooting competition that is very similar to CrossFit.
Mm.
So I was like, well, that happened. The last day of this is the first day of that competition. So I was like, cool. Well, I have a perfect end goal and something to work towards. So I could set up the rest of this for it. And what I'd done was I'd also set it up so I can maintain strength building and cardio because there's cardio. There's some sort of cardio that I'm going to have to do at least one of the days, maybe almost every day. It doesn't specifically say you have to go run outside, but one of the workouts is outside. So guess what? Most people are walking or running. I did kind of strength for 1 week, hypertrophy for 2, and then back onto strength because I thought I could probably maintain that for the whole time.
Yeah.
So the strength week, is a 5x5 workout plan roughly. And what I made sure I did was I cut the limit, like it said workout for 45 minutes. I cut it exactly at that time. I'm like, whoops, didn't get something done, but you're coming back tomorrow. Like there's no other rest day.
Yeah.
So it was very easy to say, okay, I can make this adjustable plan saying, okay, this is a strength week. And I'm really kind of pushing like closer to PRs and feeling out those different types of PRs in the next 2 weeks or hypertrophy, where I cut it right at 45 minutes. So I never broke that time period just because I didn't get done with the workout because I knew you can always add it the next day. You might be more sore anyways because you don't really have a day off. So you got to optimize all your food just to make sure that you're covering your base. So that's kind of what I did to get to that end goal. And then outside of the first workout, strength building, I would do cardio or climbing the next like part of the workout. So I'd run or walk 5 days a week at least. So that's generally what I did, which I think was manageable given the fact I have education on feeling how I feel in the moment with my body, what I've eaten that day. Like I consider all those every day, which is not hard for me with the experience I have, but just not really naturally easy for somebody to do.
Yeah. I think, well, that's a good point is the change in the stimulus is that's what could keep you going, and I think that's the reason that like doing CrossFit now, like full time, like I only go 4 times a week, maybe a 5th day if I'm feeling it, like on the weekend. But I feel so much better now because the thing about CrossFit, and this is the reason I've always been drawn to it. And you can say what you want about CrossFit, but it's everything. You're rowing, you're running, you're doing double unders, you're doing handstand push-ups, but you're also lifting, you're doing Olympic lifts. Like everything's included. And so in that sense, when you do pure strength training, and this is what I was doing prior to doing CrossFit, I was just lifting heavy for like 2 years straight. You get in this rut where it's like the same movements all the time. And then that's how you get overuse injuries like tendonitis. And I had tendonitis everywhere. Like I've had it in my knee, I've had golfer's elbow in both arms, bicep tendonitis, shoulder impingement, whatever you want to call it. And I mean, the reason is because you're just doing the same stuff all the time and like those tendons don't get a break. But when you're doing different movements all the time to where you just don't know what it's even going to be, like you get a break in those areas. And so, I mean, for something like 75 hard, like, I mean, you're throwing in climbing, you're getting a break from the same old stimulus all the time. And so I feel like if you were going to do it, like that's the way that I would imagine you do it. Because I mean, you just take on pure strength training for 75 days and you're lifting heavy every day. That's going to catch up to you sooner than later. And like, that's going to make the back half like tough.
Right. And having 2 weeks of hypertrophy was perfect because it was, more reps, less on the joints. And typically those 2 weeks too, what I would do is I'd change up the second workout for those 2 weeks. Like the intensity of the second workout was a little different than the strength days, because the strength week, I was like, okay, let's go heavier on everything. I'm going to be a little more sore and fatigued everywhere, hitting the central nervous system more frequently, hitting squats and deadlifts really heavy. So I'm not going to make my second workout as intense. I would say, okay, instead of running, I'm just going to mostly walk and I'll climb a little bit more. And on the second half of the hypertrophy days, the second workout, I would make it more intense because I'm like, okay, well, I hit a lot of hypertrophy. I'm not really sore doing hypertrophy a bunch. So I'm going to hit really hard on the climbing or really hard on the cardio, instead, which was kind of like how I was able to manage it. But again, that comes with time of understanding structures and trying a bunch of things. Because when I was lifting too, like when I first learned how to lift, I learned basic movements and I did them probably decent, but I didn't understand programming your full body workouts. So like I skipped a lot of leg days because it wasn't like my fun thing to do.
Yeah.
But also I was a gymnast and a diver. So I was like, well, I'm jumping on springboards a lot. So I didn't do heavy squats and deadlifts very much. Like it was a weakness in me physically that was harder because I wasn't like going in depth, jumping on a diving board. And I wanted to like look bigger. So I like worked on my upper body and I had like the calisthenic strength from gymnastics, but I didn't really think, okay, squatting heavy could help me with these other attributes later. And I started adding those later after I had some like muscle imbalances or some things I just wasn't good at. I needed to try to up my game again and optimize again, where I was like younger and I'm like, wow, I'm not gaining anymore. My friend's like, it's because you're not doing legs. Like you're not doing your biggest building blocks of muscle. That was when I was like 17, 18. I started doing heavy depth legs and slowly got better at it. And it just helped out my whole frame, like be more adaptable to strength.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, leg day matters a lot. And I had a client one time, he was like a college kid, but we were talking and he was like, yeah, I'm just not really seeing a lot of changes. And I'm like, well, are you doing everything? And he's like, yeah, I haven't done the leg day in like 4 weeks. And I'm like, dude, like you're neglecting half of your body, like you talk about the energy expenditure and like you're only really using half of your energy expenditure because you're not using your lower body. And like, there's people that, who is a guy that I follow? He's like whoever it was. I think he was a big time CrossFitter at one point. Like he got injured and all he could do was squat. And it was like 8 weeks or 12 weeks or something where it was just legs and like his upper body looked the same. Like it's not like he lost strength in the upper body. And because the thing is when you're doing deadlifts and squats, like you're also hitting, like you're taxing your central nervous system, and with like accessory movements, like you're really not doing that. Like you're not doing that from doing like bicep curls, and so you get a lot out of, like, that's why they say deadlifting is like one of the best movements you can do because it hits your entire body. Like there's I have this book, it's like Strength Training Anatomy. I got it in college when I took Principles of Strength and Conditioning, and the diagram of a deadlift, your whole body's lit up, because it just requires, I mean, that's why deadlifts are so technical, and that's why people injure themselves when they do them and they're not prepared to do them because there's so many things that could go wrong. But when you do them right, I mean, it's just such a good exercise, and it like directly applies to your life. Hinging is a pattern that we do all the time. Squatting is a pattern that we do all the time. And, people neglect that. And then that's how you end up with people like, needing, like, what are those called? Like the chairs.
Walkers?
Well, not the walkers, but like, people like have like the toilet chairs, like when they're old, because like, I mean, that right there, that's a squat. And like, if you don't squat, you're not gonna be able to squat. Yep. Like it doesn't matter what intensity you're doing it at.
Yep, exactly. And like the ability to pick yourself up, to stand up, to squat down. Like I started learning more and getting a little more advanced over time, and like understanding like pistol squats are extremely hard just to jump in and do, but you can just do step downs with weight. And you think about it, if people ever fall, it's not because they were squatting a bunch of weight, but it was because they were stepping down. And so stepping down in that decentric movement is like really important to like work on. But you do get it from squatting, and you do get it from doing weightlifting for the central like for that part of your body, but then you can optimize it where you're adding those into your workout, and I think it just is another building block that's going to help you.
That about wraps it up for episode 2. Thanks for listening if you made it this far. Ethan, where can we find you on social media?
You can find me at Ethan Merritt Official on Instagram or Ethan Merritt on YouTube. I think those are my most used platforms, and the Post Fitness app, both on Instagram and on YouTube as well.
You can find me at willmarshall_1 on Instagram and marshallfitnesstraining.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.